Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar, Increasing Medical Practice Efficiency and Unified Communications, presented by Paul Jenny of Eastern Datacom. Please be aware that there will be a question-and-answer portion today at the end of the webinar. To avoid frequent interruptions during the webinar, please type your questions in the question box located on the right of your screen. They will be answered in the order received during the question-and-answer portion. Additionally, an electronic version of this presentation will be emailed to all participants following completion of today's webinar, and a recorded version will be available on the website for members only. Again, NJMGMA would like to thank you for attending, and I will now turn things over to Paul.
Thank you, Dawn. Thank you very much. My name is Paul Jenny. I'm a sales manager with Eastern Datacom. First, I'd like to thank the NJMGMA for hosting this event and allowing me to present. So I'll be presenting how unified communications can improve medical practice efficiency. That'll be the topic of today. So to give you a brief introduction on, sorry here, I'm having a little, there we go, a little issue with changing screens there, but okay. So I'll give you a little introduction or background on who Eastern Datacom is. We're a data communications company that's been in business since 1988. We're based in Hackensack, New Jersey. And we've been selling really data communication type solutions to our clients for about rushing in our 28th year now. Back in 1988, we were building local area networks and wide area networks and did some structured cabling and wiring. And then we began to expand into other types of technology, all data communications related, like voice over IP phone systems, which deliver modern day unified communication solutions, as well as high definition video conferencing, wireless networking, network security, and all those types of technologies, but all focused around data communications. Now, we've been serving medical practices for many of those years, so we have a lot of different medical practice customers that we've deployed, lots of different types of technologies. Probably most prevalent has been unified communications, which has given us a lot of experience in your space to really understand a lot of your challenges from a technology standpoint, and then which has given us the opportunity then to provide those technology solutions. So again, today's webinar is going to focus on unified communications for medical practices. So we're going to begin first by, I'll give you a profile of what unified communications is for those of you on the webinar right now who may not know exactly what that means. That is kind of an industry term. And then we're going to talk about how some of the key industry drivers that is creating that need for unified communications within your industry. And then we're going to drill down a little bit further to get actually getting into the actual your practice needs from a medical practice. What are the day-to-day challenges that you're facing, and kind of give you a few case studies of how the technology can improve your business. And then we're going to go over deployment options. So there's different ways you can deploy unified communications, whether it's a premise or a hosted type of solution, and we'll touch on that. And then we'll end up, like Dawn mentioned, with some final questions. We go over a Q&A session towards the end. So first is the profile of unified communications. So what is unified communications? Well, it's really taking all the different ways that a business or a medical practice would communicate and putting them on one single platform. So for instance, different ways of communicating would be through voice, over your standard phone system, email, chat or instant message, using smart devices like iPhones and tablets, video conferencing, conference calls, like you may have multi-party conference calls, and then collaboration. And collaboration would be the ability to do desktop sharing, kind of like we're doing now with the webinar presentation. But if you have people working together, maybe a multi-site, and you need to go over a particular document, you can actually do collaboration where you can share, one person can share their desktop with multiple people. So these are all different ways that a medical practice will communicate. So a unified communications is a platform then that takes all these different ways of communicating and puts it on one single platform, which improves communication much more efficiently. And if you were a practice director, it gives you the ability to manage the business a lot more effectively and efficiently, and you get a lot of business analytics that comes with that, just to improve overall communication both internally as well as with patients. So now we kind of talk about what UC is. Let's go into what some of those key industry drivers that's really been driving this need for unified communications. So starting from the top, the first one is smart devices. I mean, that's been a phenomenon that's been coming on over the past number of years, where everybody now has a smartphone and probably has a tablet. You know, people have multiple types of smart devices that they're bringing into the workplace and that they want to use. In some cases, the medical practices are providing these types of devices, and in other cases, you know, physicians and other staff are coming on and bringing their own devices and wanting those to be integrated into the practice's communication solution. So unified communication needs to be able to take these devices and tie it all in. Next is ACO participation. So as medical offices are growing and bringing on more medical practices, you're having, you know, medical groups that have multiple locations over, you know, a geographic area, which could be within a county or a state, or maybe over multiple states. But you need to then tie these offices in so everybody has that level of collaboration as if you're all working in the same building, as opposed to having that multiple disparate systems that are kind of keeping everybody separated. You want to bring everybody together. And the other important thing with a good UC platform is that the ability to then roll it out as you bring on new medical offices, to be able to roll that out to other offices quickly and effectively is extremely important. Next is cloud utilization. So that's another big phenomenon that's been going on within the industry, is taking a lot of software applications and now putting them into the cloud to allow to have you know, third-party managers, so you don't have to manage that hardware or that software with internally. You can put it into the cloud and utilize it now as a service instead of owning the software. It's just a service that you pay, so it goes from a capital expenditure for the medical practice to an operational expenditure, and you know, lowers the need for IT resources. So a good UC platform can give you those different types of deployment options. And then finally, patient engagement. Again, you're going to be engaging with your patients. You want to make sure that you can provide good communications for them. If a patient's calling up to make an appointment or to get questions answered, you want those calls to be handled quickly and efficiently to make sure that the patient's experience is going to be maximized and they're going to walk away with a positive experience when they call in the medical practice. So again, these are the main key industry drivers that are creating for this need for unified communication. So let's go a little bit deeper down now into the actual meeting the needs of a specific practice and give you a few case studies here. So in this example, you have a physician, and physicians oftentimes will have their smart devices. They'll have their iPhones, their Android devices that they can bring in personally. Many physicians now are utilizing tablets when they're visiting patients, as opposed to using the old clipboard. You know, having the EMR software on a tablet and utilizing that. And then you have the director who wants to manage this practice and has to now manage all these different devices. So one of these features that you get from UC that is very, very popular is mobility. So what mobility is an application you can put on these smart devices that can now bring these devices under the umbrella of unified communications. So I'll give you a specific study. So a case study. So we had a specific medical practice that had one main office, had about 100 users between physicians and nursing and staff. And they often went to a particular hospital nearby, and the physicians went there. And the way they needed to communicate with the physicians is all the physicians had a pager on them. So if you were an admin person, you need to reach out to that physician. You had to page him or her, and then when they had an opportunity to call back to the main office, they'd have to get to a phone call and make that call, and hopefully they wouldn't be playing phone tag back and forth. So what we provided them for is mobility, and what mobility did was now took the physician's smart device, and they all had iPhones and Android devices. Most of them, I think, actually had iPhones, and put that mobility app on the phone. And it's just an application app that gets downloaded to the phone and ties it into their unified communications platform. So now they were able to do a lot of things with their smart device that they couldn't do before. So that's tied in with the system. So not only could they make calls that came out as their own, as the business call, they could do instant messaging and video and other types of collaboration features. So essentially what this app does is it turns their smart device into their desk phone. So if you were to call the physician at their desk and dial their extension, if they're not at their desk, their smart device would ring, and they could answer the call. However, if they made a call out using that application, the call going outbound wouldn't come across as their personal cell phone number coming out. It would actually come across as the medical office's number or their extension. So if that physician had to call, let's say, a patient directly, they could actually literally be at their house but make the call over the app, and it would appear as if the physician was sitting at his or her desk. So it gives them a thing called dual persona, where they can have their native app if they want to make personal calls, but if it becomes business calls, they open up the mobility app. But it also has the ability to do other types of features that tie into the unified communications platform, like video. They could turn that phone call into a video call if they wanted to, but they could use other features like instant messaging, which is secure, not like the chat that you have on the native dialer, but this would be a secure instant message that ties into the unified communications platform of the practice. So in the example I gave, instead of now paging the physician and waiting for the physician to call back, the administrator could actually send an instant message directly to the physician, and the physician could respond back in real time using the instant messaging on the app. So they could actually, go back and forth, and it was a secure connection, so they didn't have to worry about having any kind of patient information on there being compromised. It's in a secure environment. But now they were able to have that direct real-time conversation, even when the physician wasn't in a position to make a phone call. Another key benefit to this, which worked out well for them, is part of that mobility app allows those calls to not only be made over the cellular network, it also allowed them to make those calls over Wi-Fi, over the wireless network. So one of the challenges they had in the hospital was that the cell phone coverage was horrible. So most of the time when the physician was working at the hospital, they couldn't use their smart device at all because they just didn't have good cell phone coverage. Now with that mobility app, they could actually communicate over Wi-Fi. Again, a secure connection, but this hospital had great wireless, great Wi-Fi throughout that, a great wireless network set up. So now they could actually use their smart device now. So now they could make calls or instant message or even video if they wanted to, and be able to utilize that phone within the hospital and communicate in real time with the practice. So for them, it was a great, great solution and really, address a specific need that they had. So this is kind of just a little thing where it kind of shows you how meeting those needs in this particular slide here. And you can see how the physician interacts with the nurse, and the nurse can interact with the office admin, no matter where they're located, whether they're at, going from different locations, at the medical office, at the hospital. They can all communicate with each other in real time. And that's extremely important because, especially when you have multiple sites, multiple locations, you've got to be able to continue that open line of communication. So that UC can really address those particular needs. So just kind of going into a little bit of detail about mobility, again, it's just really integrating smart devices for the staff. With BYOD, or Bring Your Own Device, medical practices have no longer need to actually issue these types of devices for, for their staff, for the physicians or nurses or administrators. They can actually use their own devices. So instead of having to walk around with, say, 2 smartphones in your pocket, one for personal and one for business, for the medical practice, you can just have one device. Because at the end of the day, everybody wants to use the device that they went out and bought, that they feel most comfortable with. And they don't want to have multiple devices. So mobility allows them to use their own device that they've already bought and paid for, but now be able to use it for both personal and business and tying it into the overall communications platform. And again, it works over iOS. It could be Apple, Android devices. Either way, it's going to work on most of these devices. And also the ability to go over the wireless network is also a major benefit in terms of controlling cellular costs or still being able to communicate in areas where there is very little or very poor cell phone coverage. And the last bullet point there is the fact that it's encrypted, which is also extremely important for, for customer, or for patient care, personal information. It has to be very, very secure. So these just go over some of the key features with mobility. It has the ability to, again, like I mentioned before, is you're taking all these different types of communication platform and putting them on one platform, or different ways of communicating on one platform, being able to do that on your smart device, very easy. So it gives you all those features and that ability. And again, like I also mentioned, it's just like your desk phone. So if somebody were to call and you needed to transfer that call or set up a conference call, again, you can do that straight from your smart device. Again, it's going to function just like your desk phone would, but it's mobile no matter where you happen to be. So again, going over the key benefits, I mentioned dual persona. That's the ability to use your smart device for personal as well as for, as for business. Things like reduced collaboration latency. That's a euphemism for phone tag. But again, it just makes it easier. You want to communicate in real time, and it's got to be easy to use. And it's important to have a device that can just bring it all together in a very user-friendly way. One other piece before we move on that I'll mention to this is also a thing called presence, and that's another part of unified communications that you get. A key feature is something called presence. And what presence does is it really it tells you that whether you're available or not, or you may be available, not be available by a phone conversation, but you're available by instant messaging. So how that all works is, let's say you're an administrator, you need to reach a physician. Well, if you're a physician, you could take phone calls, you could put your status as available. And everybody within the practice can see that you're available if they need to call you. However, if you are with patients and you're not available at all, you can just change your status and it lets everybody know what status you're currently in, that maybe they can't call you. But if they really need to reach you, they can send an instant message or whatever that may be. But again, this is just a better way of increasing that visibility and improved communications throughout the medical practice. So we kind of talked about we just went over the mobility feature using the smart devices. So another key feature with unified communications is now is creating a desktop client. So in the past, people are used to utilizing phones and doing all the different functions directly from the phone on their desk. But this UC client can go right on their PC, or this PC client, I should say, allows the user now to control a lot of these types of phone features directly from their PC without having to touch their phone. So in other words, you're sitting at your desk and you have lots of different applications that may be open that you're working on. Well, now you need to communicate. That just becomes another application on your desktop that you can use to make communicating much, much easier. And that can be anything from, again, communicating over the phone or sending an email or collaboration or whatever that may be. So with a PC client, you can simply go up, you need to contact somebody, you can type in their name, and now it brings up all the modes of communicating with that person by the click of a mouse button. If you want to make a phone, you can click on calling their extension, and then your phone rings, or their phone rings, and you can connect them that way. If you want to send an email, well, they'll have their email addresses there. Or you can click on sending an instant message. And all these different ways, or a video call. And just by the click of a mouse button, you can engage in any one of these types of communication platform that you want to do. Then maybe let's say you have the call set up and you say, well, you want to conference more people in. You can easily, again, by the click of a button, bring other people in. You can see their presence to see if they're available or not, and then you can click on their name, and now they can just be added to that call, again, just by a few clicks of the button. Then you can escalate that to maybe you say you need to share your desktop. So again, by a click of a button, now you're sharing your desktop with those people that you're collaborating on. So these are all features and different things that can be done directly from the PC client that makes the communication process much, much more effective and efficient. particularly when you have people who would play, say, an operator role within the medical practice. So they're ones taking in those calls. They can have full visibility into the business to see who's available and be able to transfer calls, do what's called drag and drop. So you can literally drag that phone call and drop it right onto the person you need to transfer to, and everything happens without actually having to touch the physical phone. And in this particular case on the screen, as you can see, just the ability to get all the information, the people you're talking to. It shows the whole call history you may have them, instant messaging, the chat history that you may have with them, and the ability to create a conference call. And just by a few clicks, it just makes it very, very user-friendly and very easy to do, which again just improves overall communication process within the medical practice. So kind of give you another case study here. This is an example how practice leaders really need to have that challenge of improving communications internally, but also being able to handle patient volume objectives, against obviously having a positive patient encounter and making sure they're happy. So again, you want obviously the business to continue growing and the patients to call in, but you want to reduce patient no-shows, and you want to make sure it's a positive experience for that patient calling and just having visibility into the whole communications process. Again, this is how unified communications can improve all that stuff and make the communications process much more effective and efficient and improve productivity. So if you kind of walk through the slide here, it just shows you the life of how different ways of communicating internally and externally and bringing in the patient experience into this example now. So we talked about mobility as one of those features for unified communications. We also talked about the PC desktop client. There's another feature that is shown in this example is contact center, or some people call them call centers or contact centers. And contact centers allow just improved functionality in terms of that patient experience. So many practices, especially those with, multiple locations, can really benefit from centralizing that patient scheduling calls. And you can have other types of features on there, like an outbound IVR campaign. So that allows, reminders to go out automatically. IVR, for those of you who don't know, stands for interactive voice response. So you can schedule, so when you schedule an appointment with the customer, you can have these IVR campaigns go out to the patient, and that gives them different reminders of that their appointments coming up, and that's just something that's going to help you lower those patient no-shows, and it's going to provide a reminder to the patient, which just improves that overall experience. But centralizing the scheduling and keeping up to date with the patients, that all starts from that contact center, which is a great feature, especially if you have a large practice in multiple locations. It really just adds to that experience and allows you to create these types of campaigns that automate the process without having to do it manually, which just, again, it just improves the overall communication. And then in number 5 there, you see a feature called Call Me Now. This is, again, another feature that you can deploy where it's something that in the practice's portal main page, where a patient can simply click on an embedded icon and enter their callback number, and then they can receive a call back from the practice for any questions they may have. You could even set it up for there to be a chat session as well. So, yeah, not saying you need these features, but these are the types of features that become available and just improves that overall patient experience with the practice. Again, going over contact center, you can kind of see these are just the different key features that you do get with contact center and how it plays in with the practice capabilities. So, I mean, contact centers basically enable practices to truly organize and manage all their incoming and outgoing calls. So when appropriate, contact centers also include things like auto attendance, which enable patients to get the information and process these things through an automated system with maybe not even having to speak to somebody. So again, it just can lower the need for maybe agents, because you can automate certain process. Or when they call in, you can make sure that the information you get from the patient, you can then route them to the right person or the right department much more quickly and effectively. So instead of having them getting transferred all around within the practice, you can get them to the person they need to speak to much more quickly. And from a, if you're a practice director or a business manager, your ability to also manage this stuff, you get a lot of business analytics and reporting, kind of looking at the last bullet point there with activity analytics. All of this stuff within Unified Communications platform really lets you see into the business. You get tons of reporting and analytics to show you the volume of calls coming in, how the calls are being routed, and the length of these calls. And it just gives you good insight into your business. And then that can help you make more strategic decisions. So you might say, do we need to get another agent? You may look at the analytics and find out that, you know what, we don't really need another agent. Maybe you can actually have one less agent because just based off the volume, but you actually have hard data. It's not on what people feel like they need. You have the hard evidence right there, the hard data right there to look at to say, do we need an extra agent? Do we not? Do we need more phone lines? Do we need less phone lines? Is the way we're doing things internally here with the communications effective or ineffective? And then you can manage the communication system internally there by utilizing these types of business analytics. And it's just, again, going over the key benefits here. So hopefully you can see how review some of the features of Contact Center, that you can see how they play a very critical role within the overall UC solution within a physician practice. And again, the whole idea is just to improve productivity and lower costs. So we've talked about that. Let's go into now the deployment options of how you can actually deploy unified communications within your physician practice. So the first is a premises UC solution, on premises. So this is like a, think of this as a traditional, say, a phone system that you're going to deploy or that you may have. And you're putting the hardware and the software is on site. It's managed by the IT staff of the physician's practice, and you own the solution. It's a CapEx cost, a capital expenditure. You own it, you manage it, and it's right there. And that's more of a traditional way of deploying this type of solution. However, a second way of doing it is putting it to the cloud. So a lot of businesses as well as medical practices are putting a lot more technology now, more and more of it into the cloud. They say, well, you know what, we don't want to own anything. We don't want to own this technology. We'd rather pay it on an operational expense and put it into the cloud and having somebody else manage it, not our IT staff, which can help reduce IT costs. And it just, again, it's just a different way of purchasing this type of technology, going from a CapEx to an OpEx. So you're going to get the same features and functionality, but now you're deploying it as a cloud option as opposed to an on-premise solution. And then finally, with other solutions out there, you can actually have what's called a hybrid platform. It gives you the best of both worlds, where you can have in some locations an on-premise solution, in other locations you have a hosted solution. So a good example of that would be maybe a medical group that has, a main office that might have, say, 200 users. They have a full IT staff, and they want to have the technology right there on site. They may put an on-premise solution there, but they may have other offices that might only have a handful of phones, and for them, they may say, well, we don't want to actually have to have hardware at these locations and have to manage it and have their own IT staff at these smaller locations. So in those locations, you could put, you could take it as a cloud solution. You could put it into the support or the hardware and the software in the cloud, and now at the main locations on premise, but at these smaller locations, it's being fed as the cloud or being consumed as a cloud service. But they're still being able to tie all these solutions or these offices together as if it's one big solution. It's just deployed in different ways. But from the end user's experience, they won't even know whether they're on-premise system or it's in the cloud. From the end user's perspective, it all looks the same to them. But you still have the ability to manage the system and change, make changes, whether it's on-premise or in the cloud. This just gives you a lot more flexibility from a business standpoint of how you want to purchase and consume this type of service. So this is kind of concluding the presentation here. Just kind of go over some of the overall benefits that you see. Again, the whole goal of it is to increase productivity and lower costs. And part of productivity is, internal communication, making things on real time, communication in real time, as well as improving the patient experience when they call in or need to get information or have questions or scheduling appointments. And the overall idea too is then to lower costs, lowering patient no-shows and things like that. That all become costs for the business. It just gives you a lot of business analytics and automates a lot of the communications. So again, it just improves efficiency, which is overall going to lower costs and generate more revenue for the practice. So I think at this point, when you think about the different types of features that we went over in terms of mobility and the UC client and contact center, again, these are all features that can really benefit medical centers and medical practices that we've worked with have really benefited with these types of solutions. It just really has increased the productivity of their business and just made them be able to manage the business a lot more effectively. So at this point, Dawn, I think we're ready to take some questions.
Great, Paul. Thanks so much. So, folks, if you have any questions, please get them over to us now. We'll give it a couple seconds. Right now, Paul, it looks like you've done a fantastic job. I don't see any questions in the question box. But we'll give participants just a couple minutes. If not, we'll close the webinar and get the presentation out to everyone. Folks, please remember that the recorded version of this webinar will be up behind the members-only firewall on our website. Should be up by the end of today. We'll give folks just 4 minutes if there's any questions. If not, I'm going to send the presentation, the electronic version out, which will have Paul's contact information. So I'm going to direct you to send any questions directly to him. Okay, Paul, I'm not seeing any questions come across, so thank you again, everyone, so much for participating, and Paul for doing such a great job. And I'm going to close the webinar out. Everyone have a great day.